stream somewhere, you can find us on wyab.com. And then here at the radio station, we're pumping out to 50,000, I think 50,000 watts or something like that, whatever it is, all the way down to like Meridian, Vicksburg, down past McGee, and then up north, I think, past like, places up there, Laurel and stuff. So you're probably wondering, this isn't Andrew's voice. My name is Blake Bartlam. If you're a regular listener to the show, you hear me all the time. You're probably sick of hearing me. I'm just kidding. So Andrew has me guest hosting today because I had a day off of school. Shout out to Martin Luther King for that. And so yeah, any day I don't have school, I like to get in here. He likes to have me in and help showcase young voices here in not only Mississippi, but in America as well. Because I think that's important. Young people, Gen Z, we are the future of America. We are the future of the conservative movement. And if we want to have a country that we remember that looks like the country that y'all grew up in, it is important that the young generation gets involved, and not only gets involved, but gets pushed up that pedestal. So starting today, like I said, it's Martin Luther King Day. And one thing that I want to talk about is something that doesn't really get talked about enough, in my opinion. Being Gen Z, being still in high school at 17 years old, hardly anyone talks about the fact that Charlie Kirk and Martin Luther King had a lot of the same ideas. Now, let me elaborate on that because in general, whoa, what are you saying? Okay, let's talk. Both Charlie Kirk and Martin Luther King, I just want to emphasize this because it is Martin Luther King Day, is that we should not be judged by the color of our skin, but we should be judged by our merit and what we can do. It is my firm belief that Charlie Kirk and Martin Luther King both were killed because of their faith. Because they believe that we are independent from our race and that God is the truth. I personally think Charlie Kirk showcased that and lived a lot better like that than Martin Luther King did, but that's just my opinion. But regardless of that, they both said that we should not be judged by the color of our skin, but by our character and the merits that we can do. But the media won't tell you that. TikTok won't tell you that. YouTube won't tell you that, whatever. They want to lie to you and say that Charlie Kirk was some massive racist. He was a sexist, misogynist, all the buzzwords, all the ist words. I've been called those my fair share of times. I don't really care. But that's the point that I want to drive home, is that we have this whole day for Martin Luther King, and he was assassinated for what he believed. Same thing happened to Charlie Kirk. And instead, they want to ridicule his name. They want to ridicule his wife and how she's supposed to grieve. And I'd be shocked if we ever get a day for him. I don't even mean like a federal holiday where I ain't got to go to school or whatever. Just a day where it's called Charlie, whatever. They want to vilify him, criticize him, make fun of him, and essentially like take a pee on his grave. But Martin Luther King gets idolized whenever they said the exact same thing. Now, do you think it's living up to both of their messages, the same message that we're not judged by the color of our skin, that one gets treated differently because he's black and the other one gets treated differently because he's white and conservative? Just some interesting questions to start off the Monday morning. Look, usually we get in here, we start with a Bible verse. That's what Andrew likes to do. But today, I just want to get that out the way because that's something that was on my mind, and it's Martin Luther King Day, so I thought I could talk about it. Look, usually Andrew gets in here, starts with a Bible verse. I want to start with just a whole book of the Bible. All the stuff that's been going on. Trust me, there's a lot we're going to talk about today. I'm excited for it. I was like, man, this weekend basically did my show prep for me. I didn't have to think about it a whole lot. I had to scroll on Twitter and say, oh, crap, there's like 8 stories I can talk about. But I don't want to give a verse today. The book of the Bible that I want to talk about today, or at least that you go look at, is Romans. Romans has advice for everything that's going on right now, whether it's what you're going to do with your life, what God has for you, obeying the law, how you should treat other people. Romans has the answer for everything that's going on right now and everything that will happen in your life. Romans is my favorite book of the Bible because of that, and also because it's the book of the, it's essentially a lot of times people associate it with the laws and how we should act as Christians. And just Romans is just a fantastic book of the Bible for me. It's my favorite book, and it's the book of the Bible whenever I first started reading it, like for real, about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. That's the book of the Bible that like really got me like into it, and that it's one of my favorites for that. So instead of just a verse for today, whole book of the Bible. All right, so first thing we're going to get into, I know y'all tired of hearing me talk about just random stuff. Let's get into what happened over the weekend. So first, we're going to start with Friday night. So Friday night in Minneapolis, you're probably tired of hearing about it. We're going to be talking about it a lot today because that's just where everything's going on. Minneapolis Friday night, early Thursday as well. You had the ICE officer got ambushed by 3 illegal aliens. He got hit with a shovel a couple of times, stuff like that. He fired off shots in self-defense. The main culprit that was running away was the one that got shot. He was arrested, taken to the hospital. The other 2 were arrested as well. But that night you had a lot of riots and stuff like that because they were mad that their little illegal alien buddies who tried to kill a cop got arrested. I mean, just insane stuff here. They're protecting rapists, sex offenders, murderers, pedophiles. That's who these people are protecting up there in Minnesota. Truly disgusting behavior, but that's what happened. Is they had a bunch of riots after this, and this whole someone brought their baby to the riot and then got mad that the baby was subject to tear gas. What do you think's going to happen whenever you bring your toddler to a riot? You think they're not going to be subject to the elements of the riot? The cops don't just fire unless it's January 6th protesters. The cops don't just fire tear gas into a crowd for no reason. No, you're for one, you're impeding federal law enforcement, which is a felony. You're likely trespassing, which is another crime. And then 2, you're trying to hurt these ICE officers when they're enforcing immigration laws that have been around in this country for decades. They're a lot older than me, and probably a lot older than everybody there that was protesting, except for the boomers. God bless my grandpa. He's one of them in Indiana. So that's what happened Friday night. And then Friday night came out that Tim Walz and Jacob Frey, so Tim Walz, current governor of Minnesota, he won't be for much longer. He's dropping out. And then Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, along with several other Minnesota officials, they were put under investigation by the Department of Justice for impeding federal law enforcement and inciting riots, both federal crimes. And not only on top of the investigations, which investigations are great, but just like all the hearings that Jim Jordan and James Comey talk about all the time, they don't really mean anything. What was significant to me is that they were put under grand jury investigation as well. And subpoenas had already been drafted to go and get them to make sure they have to testify in front of the grand jury. Grand juries, and we know all this because of all the grand juries that Donald Trump had to deal with. Grand juries, if they convene, the likelihood of an indictment is super high. Now you might be like, "Oh, why is the indictment already?" This stuff takes a little bit. Calm down. There was a weekend. Today's a federal holiday. It's going to take some time for this stuff to happen, but it needs to happen. And whether it happens today, whether it happens right as I'm talking about, and I look like an idiot, whether it happens today or it happens, a month from now, 2 months, whatever, it needs to happen. Sooner rather than later would be great. I think we can all agree with that, but it needs to happen. So that was Friday night. Had huge news about the investigation, these people possibly getting indicted. Saturday went on. Jake Lang, whether you like him or not, I'm not a huge fan of his. He was almost killed by these people. The only reason he's with us today is because he was wearing a Kevlar vest. He got stabbed. There's videos of him, he's getting beaten, and then they finally take him out, and he's just covered in blood. It's really gruesome and gory. But that's what happened Saturday, and a bunch of other protests, and then the idiots in Minnesota had to post it on Twitter, the difference between the Minnesota National Guard and ICE and what they look like, so that all these rioters that they love so much don't hurt the Minnesota National Guard, and instead they only hurt the ICE officers. Just ridiculous stuff. Like, how's this going on? How is this a state in the U.S.? It's absurd. So that was Saturday. Yesterday, not a whole lot happened. They've finally, the local police have stepped up a little bit and quelled a lot of the the massive protests or whatever. And it's but we'll get to what else happened Sunday later. But you finally, like, these people are probably tired of all this. Minneapolis in particular, how many of all these, super controversial events that have happened in American, cultural politics speaking, George Floyd, and then the Somali fraud, and then Renee Good trying to kill an ICE officer. And so she got killed. All these things have happened just in Minneapolis. It's like, wow. And, we were sort of talking about this the last hour with Clay and Andrew, is that this isn't really, a new phenomenon for Minnesota. That the state has slowly been taken over since around the 90s. And if you really go back and look at it, that's when Somali immigrants really started pouring to the state, and then it's just been a cash flow from there. And then now the state's been taken over. They changed the state flag. It almost looks identical to the Somali flag. Really, really disturbing stuff there. And that you essentially have had a state get taken over. And they don't do anything to actually curb the problem. The people that are in charge there essentially just pan the flames, and they're a part of the fire, to be honest. I mean, Tim Walz, Jacob Frey, all of them. They've been bought. Ilhan Omar. Any state that sends Ilhan Omar to the Hill, yeah, we got some problems there that we got to work out. So that's all that stuff's been going on. And then I want to touch on this more on the next segment as well, because I could talk about this forever. But the big thing that happened yesterday that has everybody up in arms, and rightfully so, had me. I had to like sort of catch myself a little bit, because the Bible talks about all the time about, you know don't just get angry real quick and just say a bunch of stuff. And I sort of had to like take a deep breath before I put my thoughts out there on the church that got raided yesterday by the anti-ICE protesters in Minneapolis. I'm gonna let y'all think about that for a second. We had a church get interrupted in the middle of service because people were protesting ICE. That's insane. I've said this before and I'll say it again. The immigration policies of conservatives and President Trump is not it's not unchristian. Heaven has the most secure border policies anywhere. There is one legal isn't even the word for it, but there's one legal way to get into heaven. You have to accept Jesus Christ into your heart as your Lord and Savior, and you have to know him and repent for your sins. That is it. You can't just hop over the imaginary golden gates, claim asylum, and then repent, 20 years after you've died and been in heaven for that long or whatever. No. There's one way to get into heaven. And the same should absolutely apply to the United States of America, because unlike God, we can't just make things happen. We can't just make things good. We're not that powerful. In fact, we can be pretty weak. So the same should be true for the United States of America, is that we have to have a secure border if we want a nation. You can't have a nation without secure borders. You can't have a nation without assimilation. We can't have a bunch of people come into our country, wave another country's flag, and then try to have our culture bend to theirs. No, they should bend to ours, because they have the privilege of living in the United States of America. If you hate this country so much, if you love your home country so much, why are you here? Is it because you can essentially, plunder off of our benefits and plunder off of our resources? Yeah, that's probably why you're here. I'm not saying that some people don't come here looking for a better future, but there's a right way to do it. And it is just a huge middle finger to the people who actually wait in line and spend all that money that do it the right way, to just hop over the border, claim asylum for no reason other than poverty, which isn't allowed under the law. It's a huge middle finger to the people that actually do it the right way, and I can't thank the people that do it the right way enough. We should encourage that. If you're gonna come here the right way, yeah, that's awesome. That's what America's about, doing the right way. Instead of the millions of people that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Alejandro Mayorkas and all of these horrible people that ruled our country for 4 years, illegitimately, by the way. All of these people that did all these horrible things. They let millions of these illegal immigrants into our country. And this is something that Christian Nome put out this morning, is that in Minneapolis, over the last year, and I think specifically in the last, month that they've been there, really harping on Minnesota in particular, they've arrested 10,000, illegal immigrants and stuff like that, charged with the crimes, murder, rape, pedophilia, all that stuff. And that's who they're protecting. Yeah, 3,000 of the 10,000 were criminal illegal aliens, including vicious murderers, rapists, child pedophiles, incredibly dangerous individuals. Like that, and that's what they've done. Like just in the last month and last year and stuff is that's wild. That in 6 weeks they were able to catch 3,000 of these super dangerous criminals in 6 weeks in one city, basically. And that's who these people are protecting. That's what all these protests are about. These people couldn't tell you the difference between the family and the rapist. They don't care about that stuff. They care about, obviously opposing Donald Trump and conservatives and ultimately Christianity. Because as we saw yesterday, where they barged into a church. So that's what we've seen. So that just sort of sets the scene. We'll talk about the church thing next segment, because I want a whole segment dedicated for that. But it's been a wild weekend. Thankfully we made it through. I really implore President Trump, and like I said, we'll talk about all this later, really in depth, but I really implore President Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act, send in the military, Get that situation handled. If fires start elsewhere, we'll deal with that. But I'm not gonna let a hypothetical distract us from the fact that we have a real world situation going on in Minneapolis that needs to be stopped. Because in my opinion, it's domestic terrorism, what these people are doing. They're trying to harm our ICE officers who are just enforcing the law. They're protecting these rapists and murderers and pedophiles. And they're starting to encroach on the rights of the people who just live there. Whether it's barging into churches, questioning them because they think they're ICE officers, all this stuff. We'll talk about that next segment. We're bumping up on a break. You're listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back on 103.9 WYAB. You're listening to the Andrew Gosser Show, guest hosted today by Blake Bartlam. Y'all know who I am by now, I hope. If not, well, just keep listening and you'll find out. So, last segment, we talked about a lot of what was going on in Minneapolis over the weekend, but I wanted to devote an entire segment to the despicable thing we saw happen yesterday when you had a handful of anti-ICE protesters and Don Lemon storm into a church in the middle of worship service. That's insane. But before we even get into what happened there, these people don't understand the Bible. They haven't read the Bible. They hear someone on TikTok say they see the one verse of you need to treat foreigners the same. Yeah, we do treat them the same. If I barged into a church or if I barged into a mosque, let's just put it that way. If me, Christian conservative Blake, stormed into a mosque, I'm going to jail if I'm lucky to get out of there alive. Secondly, if I break laws, I'm going to jail. If an illegal immigrant, emphasis on illegal, breaks the law, they're going to jail or getting deported. So we do treat them the same. In the Bible, whenever you actually look at the context of what it's talking about treating them with compassion and then helping them out. Not once does it mention the entire government needs to give our benefits and we need to make sure that we get dragged down into society because of them. No, the Bible doesn't talk about that. But the individual charity that we can do while also acknowledging the laws of our land, that is what it means. And we see this in the book of Romans. You see it all across the Bible. And you also see whenever the Bible talks about how a city with no walls is just like a mind with, no, barriers and stuff like that. The Bible talks about this stuff. You have to have security if you want to have a nation. You have to have security as a person if you want to, be able to go forth and do good things. But these people don't understand that. And I'm sick and tired of these godless heathens trying to misquote a Bible that they haven't read to us. I'm sick of that. The Bible also talks about how the devil will try to send people as false prophets. And I think that's exactly what this is. You have a bunch of people who don't understand the Bible who are trying to tell you what it means so that you can support these demonic forces. The devil is not hiding anymore, America. The devil is right in front of our faces. No other religion faces the persecution that Christianity does. I don't know what's going to happen to these people that stormed that church in Minneapolis. But I do know what happened to a dozen or so pro-life protesters that prayed at an abortion clinic. They were tormented, arrested, faced prosecutions for months and even over years because they prayed inside of an abortion clinic. These people were praying to stop the murder of the unborn, the most innocent among us. And they were tormented by the Biden administration. But these people stormed into a church. Just picture the kids crying in there. Something needs to happen. An example needs to be made. And Don Lemon needed to be arrested yesterday. The White House press secretary, Karen Leavitt, she put out the statement this morning. President Trump will not tolerate the intimidation and harassment of Christians in their sacred places of worship. The Department of Justice has launched a full investigation into the despicable incident that took place at a church in Minnesota. And thank God for that. The whole story came out last week about how Donald Trump was furious at the lack of indictments and prosecutions of these, political operatives that weaponized our justice system for the last, 10 years or so, starting with the Obama administration. And then they continued throughout harming Trump term 1, and then obviously the last 4 years under illegitimate President Joe Biden. And then we've even still, I feel like we still see some of it even in Trump 2.0. You still have a lot of the swamp still intact at the DOJ in particular. But these people stormed into a church. That's horrible. And then they tried to, make fun and make a big deal out of the pastor that was there, and then you're disrupting this worship service over what? Over the fact that ICE is coming in and arresting criminals and deporting criminals? Making your community safer? And secondly, it is not the responsibility of the United States of America to be the world's babysitter. It's just not. And then I hear the argument all the time. Oh, Blake, but think of the countries where these people are coming from. I know the country that was founded because they believed that their rights were being infringed upon. That's the United States of America. Whenever they felt that they were facing tyranny, you know what they did? They took on the most powerful military in the world and they won, and then created the greatest country this earth has ever seen. So don't tell me it can't be done. And thankfully, we now have a president in office who's willing to actually address the root causes of this stuff. That was Kamala Harris's whole big thing whenever she was border czar, address the root causes of immigration. You know what President Trump did? President Trump went in with Delta Force and our great military, went in about 3 hours, did a regime change in Venezuela. And now you have tens of thousands of Venezuelan migrants who want to go home because their country is now a better place because of President Trump and our great military. You want to make change, you have to start doing stuff like that. If Mexico's ruled by the cartels, President Trump cut off our relationship with Mexico basically, and you had riots in Mexico the next day. You want to create change? That's what you have to do. You have to do the hard things. Good things don't come easy. And I don't think enough people understand that. But especially when we get faced with the issue that we saw yesterday, where people are storming into our places of worship, where we worship Jesus Christ, the place that's supposed to be holy above all, you've crossed the line. And something has to be done about this. And I know this stuff takes a while. Grand juries take a while. Federal investigations in particular take a while because of the nuances of federal law. And especially with how there was probably, it was like 50 of these people that stormed into the church. That's going to take a minute. But things have to happen because of this. I've already said it last segment, but the Insurrection Act has to be invoked, I think. I know that people have, what's gonna happen elsewhere because of it. I don't care because that's hypothetical in my opinion. We gotta address these problems now. And ever we have Satan making moves like this in front of us, we gotta step up to the plate, and we gotta confront it to its face. If you want to invite more incidents like this, you cower away and try to play peacemaker. No, go send a message, show how strong we can be, show how strong our faith is that you're not gonna try to barge into a place of worship and we're just gonna let it slide. Now, we can still pray for these people, pray for them, hope that they repent and realize their actions, while also understanding that we as Christians still need to do that as well. I'm not gonna sit here and let that happen though. And that's why I was so thankful that Andrew, told me I could come on today, and then this just happened as like fell into my lap. I said, wow, I finally get to talk about this stuff. It's awesome. But I'll address this more later probably because I could talk about this stuff forever. But you know who's not talking about this stuff? You know who's hardly mentioned the fact that we had a church get raided yesterday in Minneapolis? All of these supposed America First people. The Nick Fuentes types, the Sneakos. A lot of y'all probably don't even know who these people are, but Gen Z absolutely knows who these people are. They're not talking about this. I'm going to continue on this next segment, so please stay tuned in. But they're not talking about this. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? How America First are they? How pro-Christian are they? Or is it really just about getting the boogeyman that they think is there? All right, please keep listening. We're going to touch on this more. You're listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back on 103.9 WYAB. You're listening to the Andrew Gosser Show, guest hosted today by Blake Bartlam. We are back. We've been talking about what's been going on in Minnesota, and then we spent a whole segment of me ranting about them raiding a church yesterday in the middle of service, made kids cry, all that stuff. This is a verse I saw all over the break, and it sort of comments on what we were talking about. This is Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And that is absolutely true. One of the most powerful scenes that we see in the Bible is whenever Jesus is on the cross and he has the two criminals next to him. One makes fun of him, the other says, "Fool, what are you doing? This is Jesus Christ." We all know that scene, but the thing that I take away from that whole situation is whenever Jesus says, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they're doing." And I think that's absolutely true, and it goes just beyond the people protesting against ICE, but the LGBTQ community. All of the people that wanna sit there and vilify anybody that says, "I don't think we should pump kids full of hormone replacement therapy. I don't think we should chop their genitals off." These people have been twisted by demonic forces. The devil loves nothing more than to divide a community, make sure they can't reproduce, and shame anyone that tries to stop it. That's what we've been seeing going on. It truly demonic forces. And it goes beyond just these social issues. Look at places like New York City, look at Virginia. You had the Virginia lieutenant governor get sworn in on the Quran yesterday. So now you have Virginia, New York City, and then other, smaller cities across the country that have been taken over by Islam. People love to talk about Israel and the Jews all the time. You can have that conversation later, but you have to recognize the fact that Islam is a growing force in America. And the Democratic Party, they're not just doing nothing about it, they're encouraging it. Religious freedom. Do they understand? I don't think they understand what Islam is. And if they do, it's only the people at the top. But the people that Zoran Madami, they don't understand what Islam is. Go ask a woman in Afghanistan how free she feels. Go ask a woman in any Muslim country. Heck, go ask the women in England right now how free they feel. And you want to sit here and talk about how Donald Trump is infringing on the rights of American women. They can't get an abortion. How sinister. Maybe keep your legs closed and that wouldn't be a problem. That's a discussion for another day. But the point that I'm trying to make is that this is more than politics that we have at play here in America right now. We have on the pinnacle of American politics, we have a spiritual war going on. Do you want to uphold the Christian values that this nation was founded on? Or do we want to continue as a society to drift further away from God? The more and more, and I've unfortunately grown up with the brunt of this, but the more and more that we as a country, we as a world, to be honest, have drifted away from God, the more that materialism, the more that feminism, the more that, essentially self worship, atheism has grown in America, the worse off we have become as a country. Mass shootings have increased, divorce rates have increased, poverty rates have increased. All of these things have happened since we have drifted away from God. And a lot of it is because people, they get told by the system that you have to chase all of these different things if you want to make yourself happy. Happy, 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 happy. Being happy is like essentially the drug these people seek. True fulfillment in life does not come from being happy. It comes from having a relationship with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. But society has moved away from that. It has become self-worship. We have to be concerned with our feelings all the time. That's what we've seen. But if you want to talk about that, you get ridiculed, and we've seen that you get killed. But without a shadow of a doubt, there is a spiritual war going on in America right now, and it is important to note who is talking about it. The Trump administration seems to have recognized this. We have certain people in Mississippi who have. One of them's just in the next door. Y'all are going to see later how you'll see this in a couple weeks, how we're going to try to ban Sharia law. That is something that we have high on our legislative agenda as conservatives here in Mississippi. Caller, I see you. I'm sorry, but I don't want to screw anything up with this board. This is only the second time I'm doing this on my own. I'll try to get y'all next time I'm doing this. But we have people in this country that have recognized it. But I think it's important to note who hasn't. All of the people who claim to be America first and proclaim to be holier than thou. We're the real Christians. They have not talked about this. Not one word. They're more concerned with their self-righteous, proclamations against the Jews. I think that the government of Israel has some severe problems. I think that they probably killed a lot more civilians in Gaza than they should have, or that would be acceptable with the rules of war. But if you're gonna sit here and try to blame every single problem that's happened in America on Israel, you've lost me a little bit. But the Nick Fuentes types, the Sneakos, all of these super weird masculine, I'll put that in air quotes, and I know a lot of y'all listening probably have no clue who I'm talking about. But what you can do is talk to your kids or your grandkids about this stuff. Those are not role models for men. They were in a club over the weekend in Miami partying, talking about Hitler. Those are not role models for men. A role model for a man is Charlie Kirk. If you want to be a good man, go get you a wife, start a family, and make it centered around God. That is a role model for men. That's what you should be talking about. You shouldn't be talking about all of these, the Jews, where you feel self-righteous about yourself because I'm holier than thou, and I can see this and you can't. I know the people live right now watching my face, they're probably laughing right now. But that's what these people, they're crazy, okay? That's not to say that everything they say is ridiculous, but a lot of it is. But they will talk about everything except what really needs to be talked about. These are the same people that have been bashing President Trump for so long, saying that he has failed, he has been compromised. If Donald Trump was really compromised by Israel, you would have 200,000 troops on the ground in Iran right now. Iran wanted a U.S. invasion back in the summer whenever they had that little 10-day war. You know what President Trump did? President Trump dropped 5 high-precision missiles, high-precision bombs on their nuclear facilities, and that war was over. Got America out of the whole situation. That's not what Israel wanted. Israel also didn't want peace in the Middle East. You know what President Trump got? President Trump got peace in the Middle East. The whole problem with that plan, the 20-point plan, the 5-phase plan, whatever it is, that Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and all them got, the real problem there was getting Israel to agree to it. Not Hamas, not all the other countries around there. Israel was the biggest problem there. So if you want to sit here and tell me that Donald Trump is beholden to Israel, no, you've lost me a little bit, and I think you're wrong. And I think what you're trying to do is influence the MAGA movement. Influences in a wrong way. These are the same people that have tried to hijack this movement ever since we lost a voice like Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk brought this movement together. He was able to coalesce so many different opinions, put them all under one tent, and people were able to get along. But since he's gone, this was their whole plan. He's gone, so now they're going to try to take up they're going to try to take up all these different factions of the base. Try to grow their own power. But we don't have to let it happen. And you don't have to let it happen because you can talk to your kids, your grandkids, whatever about this stuff. Talk about the successes that President Trump has had. Talk about how We have real problems going on, and the hyperventilating about something that's a conspiracy is not going to help. There's a spiritual war going on in America right now, and it's time for us to step up to the plate. And there is certainly a right way we could do that. And sit here and peddling conspiracy theories, that's the wrong way to go about it. Look, we're coming up on a break. We're going to have a little short segment, and then we're getting to the next hour. Thank y'all so much for listening. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back on the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. Look, we got, I don't know, three minutes or whatever left before it starts to like fade into the next hour or whatever, however that stuff works. I just want to talk about something. We've been talking about politics for the whole, hour. We're going to continue to talk about it next hour. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about, I don't know how many people like Star Wars that are listening in, but I know Brother Andrew does, who's the main host of this show. I know he loves Star Wars, and I do too. Well, I like the old stuff. The new stuff's horrible. Anyways, except for Andor. Anyways, Kathleen Kennedy, who, if you don't know who I'm talking about, she is essentially the Kamala Harris of Star Wars, of Lucasfilm. She was put into a spot she had no business being in, and she ran it into the ground. Simple as that. That's who Kathleen Kennedy is. She finally retired the other day. And people in pop culture and all that stuff, they've been waiting on that day for decades, or not decades, but good 10, 12 years at this point. I guess it was, 10 years ago that Star Wars Force Awakens came out, and that movie essentially ruined the rules of the Force and all that good stuff. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about that, because I know Andrew wanted to talk about it today. Uh, Kathleen Kennedy is gone at Lucasfilm, and hopefully Star Wars is put into a better direction, away from the political LGBTQ nonsense that it became. And hopefully we get more stuff like Andor, where it's real stories that make the audience, critically think about what they're watching and actually respects the rules of the Force that George Lucas put in place in the original trilogy. That's what I want to talk about. Look, next hour, we got some good stuff coming up. We got some breaking news coming out of the Department of Justice. It's insights into the investigations they're going to do on the people that stormed the church. Harmeet Dillon, she is the civil rights attorney for the Department of Justice. Is she went on the Benny Johnson show. She's going to talk about all this stuff. That's what we're going to talk about next hour. And then we got some other stuff. We're going to talk about President Trump. As I know, tomorrow is actually the 1-year anniversary of the Trump administration, right? January 20th. I remember sitting at home last year. I was actually sick, so I was on the couch. I was sitting at home on the couch, and I had the flu. But me and my mom, we were watching the inauguration on the TV, and I was so happy. I had like 102-degree fever, but I was still sitting there cheering. I had my MAGA hat on. I was so happy. Man, we finally got our country back. So next hour, we're going to talk about the successes of the Trump administration that they don't tell you about, okay? And then I'm going to tell y'all, what can we do about it? And I know probably y'all are going to be like, this kid's a broken record, bro. All he wants to talk about is what Donald Trump's doing. Well, you know what other broken record we have? It's Congress. They haven't done anything for like the last 30 years, okay? So we're going to talk about what they don't want to tell you what you can do about it. And then I think probably going to end off the show with, where do we go from here as a state? What can Mississippi do to set itself apart? And we're going to touch a little bit on the school choice, everything that's been going on, and because this legislative session, in my opinion, is extremely significant, because you have this is the last legislative session before we really get into primaries and elections for 2027. And it is well known in political circles, both in the state and then in the country, that right before elections, there ain't a thing that gets done, because no matter who votes on what, no matter how small it is, it's going to be used as campaign material. And so nothing usually gets done that close to election time. So that's why this session in particular, especially with the things we have going through this session, that is why it's so important. Look, we're about to start fading out here into the next hour. Thank y'all so much for listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.1 WYAB. We will be right back. That's right, Mississippi. You are listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. We are streaming on Rumble. We are streaming on X. We are streaming on YouTube. We're even streaming on the dreaded Facebook. And we're streaming on WYAB.com. Here we are. We're in the the men's health and whatever mental wellness institute studios here in Flora, Mississippi, pumping out 50,000 watts all over the state. Vicksburg, Meridian, McGee, somewhere up there in North Mississippi. I don't remember the town up there that they limit it to. But anyways, streaming to a lot of people. And we thank y'all for tuning in. Last hour, we talked all about what was going on in Minnesota. Then we talked about, a little bit what's going on with, what the conservative movement is doing about it, spiritual warfare, all that good stuff. It occurred to me, I was listening to the and I completely forgot to. How did I forget that? We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about that this hour. Don't worry, because I got a lot to say about Greenland. Because a lot of people don't seem to understand what really is going on there with Greenland. But we got some more. We got some breaking news out of the Department of Justice. So for those who don't know, Harmeet Dillon, she is in charge of the civil rights part of the Department of Justice. And instead of being used to go after these BS, racist allegations that it had been for the last, 4 years or whatever, they're actually they're protecting Christians. They're protecting the civil rights and the religious liberties of Christians and actual cases of civil rights infringements and voting infringements and voter fraud. So she was on the Benny Johnson show this morning, and the DOJ has announced their intention to charge Don Lemon under the Ku Klux Klan Act. So the KKA Act makes it illegal to threaten, hurt, or intimidate people to prevent them from exercising their God-given rights. And that's exactly what they did yesterday. That's what Don Lemon and all the other miserable liberals did yesterday in Minnesota. And that's important. And what else is important to understand about this is that if the federal government wants to arrest someone, they have to get, all these warrants signed by the judges and all that stuff. Like, federal investigations just take long. You may not like it. I don't like it. That's just the way it is, though. And that's something we have to deal with. But it's good news, though, is that we can see that they're on the precipice of this. President Trump is paying attention to it. President Trump wants things to actually get done about it. He's been pretty mad that some things haven't been done, which is good to see. President Trump has a pulse on his voters, and he is going to go in there and execute his agenda to the best of his abilities. And it's important to understand why is this so important? And we talked about last hour about the spiritual warfare that's been going on. But secondly, let's take a minute to analyze what's going on in the rest of the world, right? The more that we've seen Christianity get persecuted in the world, you have, places like Nigeria where they have, they have a genocide of Christians in Nigeria. But secondly, let's look at, a more mellow example of this is like England and France, and where you're starting to see that Islam has taken over. And in Ireland today, they had a teacher arrested for refusing to use they pronouns for a student. So that's the First Amendment and biology that's been ignored. Well, obviously they don't have the First Amendment over there, which is because they've given up their guns, yada, yada, yada. We can litigate that problem over and over again. But they're limiting the free speech of this teacher for refusing to participate in a lie. Why in the world should a teacher be forced to call someone they, a singular person they? But it hurts their feelings, Blake. It's going to continue to hurt their feelings if you let them live a lie instead of telling them that they need to repent and turn their lives to Jesus Christ. That is the hard, honest truth. And there's nothing else I can say. But my point in bringing this story up is that this is what our country could become. If we don't pay attention, if we don't lock in and understand where things could go, if we allow Christianity to continue to get persecuted, if we allow Islam to take over more and more parts of this country, that's the situation we could deal with. Because Democrats, and we saw this the last 4 years, you give them an inch, they're going to take 100 miles. They had complete control over our legislative and executive branch for 2 years. Now, it was illegitimate, but that regardless, they were still in there for 2 years. And what did they do? trillions and trillions of dollars that they printed off that caused the massive inflation we saw, infringed on so many rights of conservatives and Christians. And they saw all these drastic measures that they tried to take in 2 years. Open our borders. Took them 2 years to do all that. Now, Republicans, it takes them like 20 years to even think about doing something, but that's beside the point. My point is that if you let them take over and you give them power again, immediately day one, what they're going to do, they're going to take away the filibuster. They're going to try to pack the court. They're going to try to make D.C., Puerto Rico. They're going to try to make those the next states so that they can go in, rig those elections, and get more electoral votes. That's what they're going to do. They're going to continue to allow unfettered migration into the United States of America, and they're going to make sure that those people not only get your tax dollars, but that those people vote Democrat and get into congressional, make more congressional seats for Democrats. That's what they're going to do if they ever get power again. They're going to start to restrict the First Amendment for conservatives and Christians. They're going to definitely try to take away the Second Amendment. If they pack the court, they can make that happen. Okay? That is why this is so important. That's why we cannot let this red line that they have crossed, we can't let it do what they want it to do. We have to take a stand, say this is not okay, and we're not going to stand for it, and go on the offensive. For too long in this country, Republicans, conservatives, even Christians don't vote that much, y'all. This is something that Charlie Kirk, Scott Pressler, all of these people that are super big on voting, Christians don't vote that much, y'all. Imagine if every single person in your church got out and voted. You think we would be in a lot of the messes we're in right now? If you had actual God-fearing Christians going to the voting polls, you think we would be in this mess? I tend to think not. Okay? We have a duty as Americans, as Christians, to get involved. Go knock the doors. Go vote. Find whatever you're good at. Look, not everybody can go and knock the doors. I completely understand that. The first few times I did it, I was scared out of my mind. I'm like, I'm knocking on this random person's door. I don't know what I'm going to say. Whatever, okay? Go knock on the doors. Personally, my favorite thing to do is to go and hand out the flyers or whatever. That's super simple, super easy. A lot of people think it's trash, but the people that you need to reach, they're going to see it, okay? And that's the goal with those, right? But find something you're good at, but get involved regardless, okay? I think that's the most important thing that we can do, because whenever we start to get involved, there's not a whole lot they can do. Democrats have a voting operation and a political operation that relies on money. Okay? We have a political operation that relies on our self-motivations and our spirit for Christ. Our motivations is not what's going to help us, it's what's going to help our communities. We're not so concerned about our feelings and our being happy and all that stuff, okay? I go out there. If this was about my personal success, I would have found whoever I could in the establishment, suck them off, and then I would have made my own career from there. If this was just about me getting some position or whatever, that's all you have to do. Because there's nothing these people love more than someone who's going to kiss their butt all day. But whenever we get involved and we all start to find the things that we're good at, whether it's knocking on doors, handing out flyers, social media, or heck, do y'all know how long it takes to put those yard signs together? It may look simple, but those plastic signs, especially when they're brand new or they've been wet or something, because, it rains all the time. Those things are hard to put together without them bending, and then you can't use them anymore. Even just doing something simple like that, it saves so much time, and it just takes off another level of stress. Okay? I think 2 cycles ago, 2024, I volunteered for 3 campaigns at the same time. It's and just trying to do signs for all of them, it's just it's a lot of stress. Even though I was doing not a whole lot, it's still kind of stressful, especially on top of school, whatever, okay? So the point I'm trying to make is get involved, okay? Don't be scared to get involved, because the minute you back down to evil, the minute it takes over. And I don't think enough people understand that, but we don't have to keep living like that. You can do it yourself and encourage your peers and your children, your grandchildren, whatever, to do the same. If you have people in high school, get them to start, Club America or Turning Point chapters at their school. And if the school district says no, take that up to court, man. Same thing happened in Gulfport. I know they've been having litigations with this in Clinton High School. We were talking about that a couple hours ago with Clay and Andrew in the studio. You know how Clinton, they had the whole big ordeal and then it created a court case and then the law and everything like that. Like, we can do stuff about this. And just because some tyrant says no, when tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes duty. That has been a saying in America since before the country was even founded. That goes back to, 1775, before 1776. When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes duty. We are not forced to sit here and take these persecutions. Go on the offensive, get grassroots conservatives involved, and then go pass legislation. We're going to talk more about this next segment, about how President Trump has essentially done everything he can with the pen, and we've still seen all of these successes. It's time for Congress to step up. And if we want Congress to really step up, we need to put good grassroots conservatives in office. Done are the days of Mitch McConnell, done are the days of, Rand Paul and all these people. I know a lot of people like Rand Paul, but y'all, you want to talk about someone who's promised a whole lot and done absolutely nothing? That's one of the worst. Bill Cassidy in Louisiana. We're sick and tired of these rhinos, and it's time. Even Leader Thune, John Thune. Talk about more of this, next segment. We still got a couple minutes, but Congress needs to step up. And if you want Congress to step up, we have to step up. It can't just happen overnight. It can't just happen because we're talking about it. You got to go do something. I try to think of all these things, they had the big beautiful bill they passed, but where's the election integrity? Where's that legislation? Where is, banning Chinese farmland? Where is, even some regulation on AI? I think since 2026 has started, you've seen people kill themselves because of conversations they had with AI. They don't talk about these stories a lot because it's AI companies that are all, in bed with Congress. And this is not me saying that AI is a bad thing. AI can be a very good thing, but it's important on how we use it. I can't say how many times I see my friends at school, no hate to them or whatever. I mean, if it's at their disposal, what do they expect kids to do with it? A lot of times they just copy and paste something from ChatGPT and that's their assignment. They turn their work in, whatever. Okay. AI can be more than just something that dumbs us down as a society. It can be more than just something that takes away jobs. What we can do is let AI help us solve our biggest problems. It needs to be a tool, not a crutch. And I don't think enough people understand that. Like, I see this all the time, and a lot of the economic development we've seen in the state has been fantastic. It's something that's needed to happen for a while. I think the best example of it has been like that, the Milwaukee tool plant up, near Grenada. Like, stuff like that is awesome. But these data centers, I'm not so convinced. Because it just how much energy and how much water that stuff takes, and then especially where they're putting them, like, out in the middle of nowhere, it's like prime farmland. It's like the solar farms, in my opinion, all over again. I just don't think we're using our resources the right way, and I think that just diving headfirst into this AI stuff isn't the smartest move. And if we really wanna be conservative about it, I think we need to actually be conservative about how quickly we, dive headfirst into it. So but we're gonna talk about a lot of this, next time is what Congress needs to do. Because whenever we're in this situation where we got churches being raided, we have, an entire city basically that's been taken over by illegal immigrants and the government officials there are compromised. Yeah, we gotta do something about that and make sure that it doesn't spread. And unfortunately, we've been seeing it spread, like we talk about, Zoran Mamdani in New York and then the lieutenant governor in Virginia being sworn in on the Quran. Like, we're not far away from this becoming a much bigger problem, and people aren't talking about it, and they need to be. And that's one of the goals that I had today, and then every time I get a microphone in front of me, is sounding the alarm on this. Because silence, in my opinion, is complicit. Is complicity. And I'm not gonna sit here and be silent about this stuff whenever not only is it my future, but it's the future of everyone on the line. My children, my grandchildren, their generations, all that stuff, the future generations. That's what's on the line here. And if I wanna make sure that America is recognizable in 30 years, heck, even like 10 or 15, we gotta step up and do something about it, and we gotta continue to fight. because, like I said, you give them an inch, they're going to take 100 miles. And I saw what they could do in 2 years. I don't want to see what they can do with 4 or 8 or 12. I really don't. And I don't think any of y'all do either. So, like I said, find a way to get involved, find what works out best for you, and do it. Because not everybody's going to be good at everything. I talked about this. Some people, they're really good at, playing baseball. Some people are really good at writing books. Okay. We're not all called for the same thing, but we're all called for different things that we can use to work together. And that's one of the reasons why I talked about, earlier is, I don't have a specific verse for today, but go read the book of Romans. You got questions, go in there. Look, we're on a break. Well, we're going to talk about a whole lot next segment and the rest of the hour. Thank y'all for tuning in to 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back.
And patriotism in honor of the 200.
Real quick, Andrew filling in while Blake is out of the studio. Is not Blake just friggin' killing it? He's doing an awesome job. I appreciate everybody who followed on Rumble. Make sure you follow Blake on X and on his YouTube, which is I'll have him plug it, but he's got a YouTube channel. He's on TikTok. We need Blake to be seen. He is going to be the future of the conservative movement here in Mississippi. There are other good young conservatives out there too, and I'm behind them as well. But we need more voices like Blake out there, and the best way you can do that is follow him on X. Please follow me on X. It's just Blake Bartlam at BlakeBartlam on X, and you can follow him on Twitter or on TikTok, and he's just doing a hell of a job. All right, he's coming back. I'm getting the heck out of the studio.
And we are back on the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. I don't know about y'all, but I like the 80s sort of music that he has playing in. I don't get to hear a whole lot of that, in my everyday life. So I like every time I come into the studio, I know that Andrew's transition music is gonna be awesome. Some throwbacks to some great times I've heard. Wish I was around for some of that stuff. Anyways, we've been talking about all sorts of stuff. Basically, everything's been revolving around Minneapolis and the spiritual warfare that's going on in this country and what people are doing about it. Let's zoom out for a second. We're gonna stop talking about Minnesota. We probably will later in the show. Sorry, but I need to talk about Greenland. Greenland has been in the news a lot lately. But this is not an issue unique to President Trump either. Don't get it twisted. This has been something that many people have talked about for a long time. But President Trump has made it a priority of his, and for very good reason. Very good reason. So, for those that don't know, the United States is actually closer to Greenland than Denmark could dream of. And it's a lot more beneficial for the US to have Greenland than essentially any other country in the world, right? So, Greenland is sitting up there at the North Pole, and whenever you look on a map, which a lot of Democrats haven't, and a lot of people that don't like this haven't, look at Greenland and then look at where it is compared to Russia. You then quickly understand why this becomes such a problem. So, to understand the geography of Greenland, there's like 50,000 people there. I'm under the impression that Europe and the EU has sent like 10 troops over there to protect Greenland. I guess they're guarded by, I think President Trump coined the term that they were guarded by one dog sled. Now they're guarded by two. So what I'm saying is that there's nothing there. Secondly, all of, beyond the borders of Greenland, you have, what is it, like the North Sea or the Arctic Ocean, something like that, whatever it is up there. But it's just ice. Like it's just a bunch of ice. Okay. And but because climate changes, I'm not advocating for climate change here. I'm saying that that's just what happens on the earth. The earth gets warmer, the earth gets cooler. It's been going on for thousands of years. So, all that ice up there, some of it's going to start to melt and it's going to create a bunch of shipping lanes and, travel routes, stuff like that. And if you can fit a cargo ship through there, you know what else you can fit through there? Navy ships. That's why this is so important, okay? Because who controls that, it determines a lot for the geopolitical future of the world in the short term and even the long term from whenever that happens, okay? Here's why President Trump wants it. For one, for that, okay? It's going to be just like the Suez Canal, just like the Panama Canal, stuff like that. Whoever controls that is going to have a large say, pretty much the only say in the trade that goes on through there. Secondly, President Trump wants to put the Golden Dome there. And if you don't know what the Golden Dome is, that is the plan that President Trump has that is essentially the U.S.'s version of the Iron Dome in Israel, where if we need to, we can just shoot a missile out of the sky so that it doesn't harm America. And instead of just being focused on, the primitive rockets that Iran sends to Israel, this is going to be like to get the supersonic, nuclear warheads out of the sky. Okay, that's the goal of this. And we all know that the global tensions in the world haven't exactly been super good lately because of what the Biden administration let happen all across the world. So that's why something like this is necessary, right? And we would always rather be safe than sorry. Who in the world wouldn't want to make sure that we can shoot a nuclear bomb out of the sky? Well, Denmark has. I do not care. I could care less. Okay. What reason does Denmark have to have Greenland? Leif Erikson landed a boat there 500 years ago. Well, the U.S. You know what the U.S. has? The U.S. spends more money and sends troops to Europe to help protect them from Russia. The least you can do is give us this sheet of ice that has 50,000 people on it so that we can put our troops, our defenses, get the minerals out of it, and actually make something worth of it, okay? Denmark's not going to do that, but the U.S. can, and that's why it's so important. It is for the national security of the United States of America. And President Trump, it is well within his powers as commander-in-chief to go get Greenland. Do I think he's going to invade Greenland? No. Okay. He's not going to do that. Denmark doesn't know if he's going to do that or not. You may as well listen because look what he's done. I mean, what, 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, that he just yoinked a president in the middle of the night out of Venezuela. Okay? So if President Trump says something, you probably should listen. So go in, whether you have to buy it, whatever, get Greenland, ensure the security of the United States of America. And that's what President Trump wants to do. That's why it's so important. And all of the people who are telling you that he can't do this, it's, egregious, whatever, okay? These people are the same people that have sold out the US to China and Russia for the last 30 years. Okay? All of the establishment types, all of the globalists, the people that have not put America first their entire careers, the same people that voted against the border wall in Trump's first term. They are corporate, globalist sellouts. That's what they are. And that's why they oppose something like this. Because they don't want to see the American people put first. They don't want to see the national security of the American people put first. They want a globalist world order, as Steve Bannon calls it. That's what they want. And that's what they've been fighting for the whole time in Congress. That's why there's been no progress. That's why there's been it's essentially just been ways for them to line their own pockets. President Trump's not going to back down. The American people are not going to back down because this is about our future. This is about our national security. And President Trump, as commander in chief, understands that completely. And that's why he's made this such a priority. People love to dog on him all the time. It's like, he needs to focus more domestically. This is going to be domestic if we don't tackle it while it's not. Okay? This will affect domestically the United States because of all the trade and all of the minerals and stuff that it opens up. Whenever that ice melts, you know how much money the US can make because of controlling that trade route? And this isn't to say we need to alienate our allies and be unfair about it. It's just understanding the world. We're the United States of America. What is Denmark and Norway going to do? Nothing. If Russia came knocking on the door, heck, China wants a piece of Greenland too. China said there's a council or whatever up there. It's like the Arctic Council or whatever. China wants to be a member of it. China is nowhere near the Arctic Ocean or Greenland, okay? But they want a piece of it. Why? Because they understand how important it's going to be. And whenever that's the case, and we have our enemies across the world stage, whenever we have them who want to try and take advantage of the situation, President Trump has to step in as commander in chief and say, no, that's not going to happen. The United States of America is going to finally flash its big guns, and we're going to go in there. We're going to get what we need to protect our people and ultimately protect the world. Because if America falls, the rest of the world falls. There's a reason they rely on our national security. They rely on our military to help keep Russia at bay in Europe. Because they know we're the best military in the world. Hands down, no doubts about it. So that's why this is so important. And I don't think enough people understand that. But hopefully I've helped educate some people. And go talk about that stuff because people need to know this, and it doesn't just come from me, it comes from all of us. Look, we're about to head to a break. Gonna stick around for the last couple segments. Thank y'all for listening. Listen to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back on the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. I only got 20 minutes left. Today has flown, but time flies when you're having fun. Thank y'all for hanging out with me and listening in these last, hour and a half or whatever. So we've been talking a lot about Minneapolis, talking a lot about Greenland, and all this stuff that's been going on. But I don't want to let it be forgotten. Tomorrow is the 1-year anniversary of Trump 2.0. The inauguration of President Trump, second time, happened 1 year ago tomorrow. And I don't think enough people are talking about, I don't think enough people understand how much success we have had happen here since he's gotten back into office. And largely, he's done this on his own. Congress hasn't really helped him out hardly any. You got the big beautiful bill, of course, which that's going to start to take effect this year, and we should see some huge things happen because of it. But you had the Lake and Raleigh Act. You had the protect kids with AI stuff. But that's about it. Okay, nothing else super major has happened. But let's talk about what President Trump has been able to do despite this essentially being a one-man show. No help from Congress, basically, whatsoever. So the big thing is affordability. That's what everyone's talking about. That's what even my friends are talking about. The politically illiterate among me. I'm just kidding. They're great. But anyway, that's what everyone's talking about. Affordability. What has President Trump done to address it? A lot of the people on the right, I put that in air quotes, they want to sit here and say President Trump hasn't done anything and his tariffs make things worse. If you look at trueflation today, and for every year of 2026, every day of 2026 so far, it has been below 2%. It's hovering around 1.7, 1.6% right now. The Fed's target rate is 2%, by the way. So inflation is below the Fed's target rate, and we have taken in over $250 billion in tariff revenue. President Trump was right, and the experts were wrong. Tariffs have helped America tremendously in just a year. Imagine what they can do in the long term. Billions and billions of dollars of investment is pouring into the country, and eventually we're going to start to see the returns on it. All job growth that we have seen has been in the private sector, and that is because of this investment. Okay? You've had I think it's over 2 million foreign-born workers leave the workforce in the last year, alongside, I think it's like, I don't know how many 100,000 it was, federal workers be fired. And yet we still had a year where we almost gained 1 million jobs in the private sector. That's tremendous, y'all. And people aren't talking about it. People are not talking about it enough. All right, second thing that this is really thing that one of the main reasons, if not the main reason that President Trump was voted in, is the border. Y'all, we have the most secure border this nation has ever had. We have now gone 8 months in a row with not a single illegal alien being released into the United States of America. 8 months in a row. There were some months under the Biden administration where you had over 100,000 illegal aliens released into the United States of America. Some months where it was multiple 100,000, a few 100,000 people. Okay? That's the significance of this. That's why this is so important. The border is secure. And that doesn't just stop with illegal immigrants coming in. That helps curb human trafficking. That helps curb the drug epidemic. That's why we've seen fentanyl deaths in America and overdose deaths in America plummet. They're on a nosedive down. And no one's talking about it. That should be a front page news story on every publication in America. The drug epidemic is going down. I know a couple of people that I went to school with, and everybody knows someone, whether it's a family member, a close friend, whatever, that has had to deal with drugs or lost someone to drugs. I know a few people that have lost their lives to drugs. This isn't just an issue that affects people based on their religion, their political identity, whatever. Addiction is real and it affects families every single day. But President Trump, the FBI, Border Patrol, Homeland Security, ICE, you name it, They have made stopping the drug epidemic in this country a priority, and it has worked so far. We seized a record amount of drugs. At the same time, a historic low amount of people died because of drugs. And they didn't have to do it with the huge federal overreach or federal programs or, new laws, the war on drugs. They didn't have to do that. You stop the flow at the border and you arrest criminals. That's what you have to do. And that's what the Trump administration did. And it has worked and it has saved so many countless lives. But the media doesn't want to talk about that. The America First people don't want to talk about that. Why? What's their real agenda that they're pushing? And that's something I like to talk about all the time because it's important to understand that the MAGA movement that essentially reformed the Republican Party and was able to break that political wall that had been strangling America for decades, it's not just being attacked from the left, it's being attacked from the right. And it's important for us to keep our guard up and understand that there are multiple forces at play, and especially with Charlie Kirk being gone, who was able to unify the base so much that we can't let them they can't let them stop our movement, whether it be from the left or the right. Put that in air quotes once again. Okay? That's why this stuff is so important. And then foreign policy has undoubtedly been a success for the Trump administration. Ended 8 wars, destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities, peace in the Middle East, and then obviously what they did in Venezuela, taking out Maduro like that. It is impossible to overstate the success that foreign policy has been for the Trump administration. People like to haven't into the Ukraine war yet. Look, y'all, the biggest problem there hasn't been Putin; it's been Zelensky. Zelensky is almost doing everything he can to keep that money flow going, because America cut it off, but the Trump or the European Union is not, and we don't know where a lot of that money's going. But that has been the only thing they haven't been able to accomplish, but I can tell you President Trump is working his butt off to try to get it done. And it's a really simple and honestly just common sense way of going about it. He wants to see people stop dying. That is one of his main motivations in his entire political career. He just wants to see people stop dying. And I wish we had more politicians that thought that way, instead of thinking about the money part of it and how can I make my own pockets bigger? What do my lobbyists want? Okay, he wants to see people stop dying. And that pro-life approach to things is what we need out of every politician in America. Speaking of pro-life, the March for Life, sorry, kind of segueing into abortion here, but that's something we were talking about last hour with Clay, or a couple hours ago with Clay, is, we have our main pillars that are just I'm not going to go against. If something goes against this, that's a no-go for me. Mine is, faith, family, and, First, Second Amendment, and then abortion. Anybody that supports abortion, you're gone. Cutting you off. Can't do that. The March for Life in D.C. is this week, and Vice President J.D. Vance is going to headline the speakers there. They put that out last week. I really don't think anybody's hardly talking about it, but J.D. Vance is going to be headlining the March for Life. And for those that don't know, there has been sort of a movement on social media, specifically in Gen Z circles, but it's sort of branched out a little bit of just trying to attack J.D. Vance. And he's fake, he's this, he's that. Y'all, there is no one that embodies this, like, what it means to be an American quite like him. He grew up in a family in rural West Virginia where his mom was a drug addict and all that stuff. If you haven't even looked at the story of Hillbilly Elegy, you need to go look at it. And then he went to the Marine Corps after dealing with all that trauma in his childhood, and then he was a business owner. And then he got fed the lies of the radical left and believed him, but then he actually watched President Trump's first term, and it changed his mind. That's a story that so many Americans can relate to, whether it's the political indoctrination and finally getting out of it, whether it's the broken family from drugs, or whether it's being a business owner, or whether it's being a veteran. There are so many things that people can relate to, and J.D. Vance is fighting for people like that every single day. And he's going above and beyond about it, and he's going to go fight for the unborn, fight for the most innocent among us, the unborn children of this country. Okay? That is something that we need to commend, and that's something we need to encourage. I don't care how unpopular it may be to be pro-life. I don't care. I will fight, and I will encourage people to fight for the unborn every single day. Because there is nothing more heinous, nothing more horrible than the mass murder, the murder of the most innocent among us. And 99% of the time, this isn't just me pulling a number out of my butt, you can look this stuff up. 99% of the time, a baby is aborted just because. Rape and incest in the life of the mother don't even make up that full 1% that's left. There's like 0.2% for some other thing, okay? So 99% of the time, that baby is just aborted just because. That's horrible. The Aztecs and all the other Native American tribes, there was a lot that did child sacrifice, and that's something they don't teach in school, but they should. And they did it because they believed that whatever god that they worshipped would give them a better life because they sacrificed their kid to it. That is the same logic that liberal, sick women use across the country. I can't afford this baby. This baby's gonna drag down my life. That's what we've seen, and it's shameful. Look, we're pushing up against a break. We have one more segment left. Thank y'all for tuning in. You're listening to 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back on the Andrew Gosher Show on 103.9 WYAB on our last segment here, y'all. Thank y'all for tuning in and listening to me today. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I got a day off of school, so Andrew let me come in and guest host. So thankful for him for that and all that he has done to help me. But look, I got 5 minutes here. I want to talk about, last thing I want to talk about is Mississippi. What can we do? I believe that Mississippi needs a change in thought. Okay. For too long, the leaders of this state, whether it be in the governor's office, whether it be in our state legislature, lieutenant governor, all of our statewide offices like Attorney General, Secretary of State, they need a change of thought. Mississippi, for too long, has been a state of followers. The leaders in the state have been followers. It is time for Mississippi to be leaders. Mississippi has never been a state to back down from a fight, and Mississippi has never been a state afraid to face change. I believe that our leaders don't showcase that right now, and that needs to change, both at the federal level and at the state level. I think Cindy Hyde-Smith did one thing. I think she spoke at one thing to campaign for Trump before 2024. All the rest of our people, they didn't do anything. Okay? Why aren't they out there? Why aren't they pounding the door? Why aren't they trying to get this legislation through? Why are they just sitting there lining their own pockets? Why is our state legislator taking so long to get some of these issues on the table? Why in the world are we having to actually introduce legislation to ban Sharia law in 2026? That's something that should have been done a long time ago. Okay? But we can change that. We can change the way that the state of Mississippi operates and thinks. We can be a state of leaders. We just got to put the right people in place to do that. Okay? And that starts all the way at the governor's office, all the way down to your local House of Representative person for the state. All 120 something or whatever it is, okay? We have to change the way the Mississippi thinks so the Mississippi can change and that we can finally get meaningful results for all of the people across this state so that we can finally get real economic development in the Delta, so that we can finally start to get education freedom, and education freedom that does it the right way, and we're not just pushing it through, okay? I'm a huge fan of the school choice bill, but I think there's some elements that need to be changed in it, okay? But school choice as an idea, 100% needs to happen. Let's just make sure we do it the right way. But there's other things that we can do as well. Like, why in the world are we having to ban Sharia law? Why isn't that already done? And why do I know that there is 3 different bills about it? One is super weak, one is super strong, and one is right in the middle. Why aren't we just pushing the super strong one? Go all the way with it. What are we scared of? They're scared of the donors. They're scared of the Democrat Party. That's who Delbert Hoseman's afraid of. That's who so many people are afraid of. Because they have failed the people of Mississippi, and that is their true rulers, okay? But Mississippi, we can change that, and that is why 2027, I say it every time I'm on the air, 2027 is the year that we can make or break this state. Put real people in office, real people who can relate to the everyday struggles of people not only in Mississippi, but across the country. People who are actually proud to be from here and aren't going to shy away from what it means to be a Mississippian, to what it means to be Southern by the grace of God. I don't think people understand that, and they certainly don't legislate it like it, okay? So thank y'all so much for tuning in today. I've had a blast. Next day I get off of school. Hopefully I'll be in here. So thank y'all so much. It has been a great day. And if there's anything I can say as parting wisdom, just go open your Bible. Go seek a relationship with Christ before you seek a relationship with anything else. Thank y'all so much. Y'all listen to 103.9 WYAB. Have a good one, y'all.